Amy Adams, a 1-minute bell.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, I'm very happy to rise this afternoon and take a call on the Westpac New Zealand Bill, a private bill introduced by my friend and colleague Craig Foss, who of course chairs the Finance and Expenditure Committee and does so very well. Mr Speaker, the events of the last 2 years have really brought into sharp focus the need for a robust and well-respected banking sector. And certainly in New Zealand, one of the reasons we've come through, I certainly won't say unscathed, but in a better position than a lot of countries, has been that actually, as we've gone through these difficult times, our banking system and our banks in particular have worked very well, and there have been institutions that have proven themselves to be ones New Zealanders can have faith in. And there's nothing more important to our good system of financial markets in this country for that to be the case. A big part of that, of course, is the Reserve Bank and the role they play as both the regulator and the prudential supervisor of the banks. And I know that the Reserve Bank has taken a position some time back that it is in the best interest of New Zealand and New Zealand customers that those banks that operate in New Zealand to such an extent that they play an important systemic role in our banking sector should largely operate as New Zealand registered subsidiaries rather than branches of offshore banks. And that's certainly been the way that they've encouraged banks to move. And it's not unusual by any means for banks to have both subsidiaries here and branches here of offshore entities. And that's currently how Westpac operates, and I understand it's one of 4 banks that does that. But it is, sir, one of our big banks in New Zealand, and we do need it to operate well and to be in a position where, should there be an issue in the future, the Reserve Bank has complete wraparound of the issues that it needs to control as part of its regulatory oversight. And for that reason, sir, we've had the Reserve Bank instituting this liabilities cap, which sets an amount beyond which the banks cannot rise to operate as branches of offshore entities. And while Westpac has certainly always traded within those requirements, and there's no question that it doesn't, what we're seeing through this bill with the movement of the institutional banking sectors into Westpac New Zealand and away from the branch operations is really about ensuring that no matter what volatility the markets have in years to come, Westpac will be in no danger of stepping outside that cap. And I know that this is something that they've been talking with the Reserve Bank on for many years and been working with the Reserve Bank. And this piece of legislation is actually a reasonably small one in terms of the impact, but it's symptomatic of a much wider issue that we work on in the banking sector and with the Reserve Bank, and that is to ensure, as I said, that not only do we continue to have a strong and robust banking sector, but that our Reserve Bank, that does such a good job of prudential oversight, has the ability it needs and the tools it needs to control all aspects of the banking operation should that become required. Just looking through the bill, I think there's probably a couple of things that are worth commenting on so that there's no confusion about the extent of the powers of the bill. There are specific provisions in there to ensure that customers' relations are effectively seamlessly moved from one to other. So any institutional, so the big customers currently dealing with Westpac as a branch of the Australian company will move seamlessly through to being customers of Westpac New Zealand, really without any impact at all from them, and similarly with transfer of staff and the like. And that's the reason a private bill is needed to achieve these matters, to ensure that is that seamless transition, and that other than a sort of a back-end reorganisation, it will really be business as usual for everyone who's dealing with Westpac. I think the other point that's worth making for anyone who is listening at home and perhaps isn't quite aware of the ambit of this, it is just worth reiterating that the retail banking business, the mum and dads and the people who use the branches and the FPOS cards, that's always been, sort of for many years been encapsulated in Westpac New Zealand as a standalone company, and certainly, sir, that there is no reason that would change. That won't change. It is just that big business customers dealing with the institutional banks that this affects, and even those customers will have those relationships entirely protected. And the other thing I think that's just worth noting in closing is that, of course, the actual transfer of assets and specifics that go across will be determined by Order in Council, as has always been the case with such matters. So, Mr Speaker, it's a small but necessary bill. It's a step towards the entirely New Zealand incorporated banking system that the Reserve Bank is very keen on, and I'm very pleased to support it.
Stuart Nash.
Thank you.